The conference room smelled like expensive cologne and German precision. I was 3 slides into my Q4 projections presentation when my phone vibrated on the mahogany table. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I ignored it. Heinrich Müller from Stuttgart was leaning forward, clearly impressed by our 18% year-over-year growth. This deal would bring another $7 million into the firm, my firm, the one I'd built from nothing over the past 23 years. 4th vibration. 5th. My stomach tightened in that primal way that only mothers understand. Something was wrong. "Gentlemen, please excuse me for one moment," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my hands reached for the phone. Professional, controlled, always controlled. That's what 57 years of life had taught me. That's what building Aldrich Financial Consulting from a tiny office in Queens to this corner suite in Manhattan required. Control. I stepped into the hallway, pressed my thumb to the screen, and felt the world tilt sideways. A text message from Elowen, my daughter, my only child, my entire universe condensed into one person. "Mom." My mother-in-law threw boiling water on me because I wouldn't give her money. My husband was right there and he said nothing. "Mom, it hurts so bad." Attached was a photo that made bile rise in my throat. Elowen's left arm from wrist to shoulder covered in angry red burns. Blisters already forming. The kind of injury that would scar. The kind that required a hospital. The kind that someone inflicted deliberately, with cruelty, with intention to maim. My beautiful daughter. The girl I'd raised alone after Richard died 8 years ago. The woman who'd inherited his gentle nature, his artistic soul, his devastating inability to see evil in others until it was too late. I didn't remember walking back into the conference room. I didn't remember what I said to Heinrich and his colleagues. My assistant Laura told me later that I'd apologized, something about a family emergency, and that they understood completely. They'd rescheduled for next week. The deal was still secure. I remember none of it. What I remember is standing in my private office, staring at that photo, reading that message over and over until the words burned into my retinas. Meilin Zhao, my daughter's mother-in-law. The woman who'd looked at me with barely disguised contempt since the day we met 2 years ago. The woman who'd called me a bad influence because I'd raised Elowen to be independent. The woman who thought American women were selfish, disrespectful, corrupted by Western individualism. The woman who had just assaulted my child. I opened the mahogany cabinet behind my desk, the one that required a key I kept on a chain around my neck, hidden beneath my Armani blouse. Inside were files, documents, things that mattered. And in the back corner, wrapped in soft leather, was something that had belonged to Richard. Something I'd kept for 8 years, never quite able to donate it or throw it away. His rifle case. Brown leather, worn smooth in places from years of use. Richard had been an avid hunter before his heart attack. Deer season upstate. Clay pigeons at the range. He'd tried to teach Elowen to shoot when she was 16, but she'd cried at the sound of the gunshot. Too sensitive, too soft. My gentle girl in a world that demanded hardness. I pulled the case from the cabinet, empty, of course. The rifle itself had been sold years ago, right after the funeral. I couldn't bear to look at it, couldn't bear the reminder of all the future hunting trips Richard would never take. But I'd kept the case. Sentiment, maybe. Or perhaps some deeper instinct that one day I might need it for something else entirely. I slung it over my right shoulder, adjusting the leather strap so it sat prominently, unmistakably. Then I grabbed my purse, my car keys, and walked out of my office without a word to Laura or anyone else. The drive from Manhattan to Queens usually takes 45 minutes in midday traffic. I made it in 30. I don't remember most of it, just fragments. The smooth leather of my Mercedes steering wheel under my white-knuckled grip. The GPS voice directing me with mechanical indifference. Turn left, turn right. Your destination is ahead. My destination. Mei Lin Zhao's narrow two-story house with peeling yellow paint and a garden gone to weeds. The place where my daughter had just been tortured, because that's what it was. Not an accident, not a momentary loss of control. Deliberate torture designed to punish, to hurt, to teach some twisted lesson about respect and obedience. I called Elowen from the car 2 blocks away. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with tears and pain. "Mom? Baby, where are you? Are you still at their house?" "No, Dexter drove me home. We're at the apartment. Mom, I can't believe she did this. I can't believe he just stood there and watched." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Dexter, my son-in-law. The man who'd promised to love and protect my daughter. The man who'd stood by while his mother poured boiling water on his wife's skin. "Did you go to the hospital?" "We're going now. Dexter's getting the car keys." "But Mom, I'm so scared. What if it scars? What if—" "Listen to me carefully," I interrupted, pulling over to the curb. I needed to focus. Needed her to focus. "You go to the emergency room right now. You tell them exactly what happened. You tell them your mother-in-law deliberately threw boiling water on you. You make sure they document everything, every burn, every blister. You take photos of everything they document. Do you understand me? Mom, I don't want to get her in trouble." "Elowen." My voice came out harder than I intended, sharp with fear, disguised as anger. "She assaulted you. She committed a crime. You will document it. You will create a paper trail. And then you will let me handle the rest." Silence on the line. Then, quietly, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to have a conversation with Mei Lin, that's all. Just a conversation." "Mom, please don't do anything crazy. Trust me, sweetheart. Have I ever let you down?" Another pause. Then, "No, never." "Then trust me now. Go to the hospital. I'll call you in an hour." I hung up before she could argue further, before she could ask about the edge in my voice, the coldness that even I could hear. The version of myself I kept locked away, except in the boardroom, when negotiations turned brutal and someone needed to understand exactly who they were dealing with. Mei Lin Zhao was about to get a very thorough education. I parked directly in front of her house. Didn't bother looking for a subtle spot down the block. I wanted her to see my Mercedes, wanted her to see me stepping out in my $1,200 suit and Louboutin heels. Wanted her to see the rifle case slung over my shoulder as I walked up her cracked concrete path. The doorbell made a cheap buzzing sound. Footsteps inside, slow, shuffling. Then the door opened, and there she was. Mei Lin Zhao, 62 years old, 5'2", gray-streaked black hair cut short in a practical bob. She wore a faded floral house dress and slippers. Her hands were wrinkled, spotted with age, the hands of someone who'd worked hard her entire life. In another context, I might have felt sympathy, might have seen her as what she was, an aging immigrant woman trying to navigate a world that had changed beyond recognition. But all I could see were those hands holding a pot of boiling water. All I could see were the burns on my daughter's arm. Her eyes met mine with defiance. Then they dropped to my shoulder, to the rifle case. I watched her face change, watched the defiance crack into something else. Not quite fear, not yet, but uncertainty. Calculation. "What do you want?" she demanded in heavily accented English. "Why you come here?" I smiled, not a friendly smile, not the smile I used with clients or at charity galas, the smile I used when someone had made a very serious mistake and was about to discover the cost of it. "We need to talk about what you did to my daughter, Mei Lin. We can do it out here, where all your neighbors can hear exactly what kind of person you are. Or you can invite me inside, and we can discuss this privately. Your choice." She hesitated, glanced over my shoulder at the houses across the street. Mrs. Rodriguez was already peering through her curtains, probably wondering why a woman in a designer suit was standing on Mei Lin Zhao's porch, carrying what looked very much like a gun case. "Fine," Mei Lin spat. "Come in, but you not welcome here. You never welcome." The feeling, I replied, stepping past her into the dim hallway, is entirely mutual. The house smelled like old cooking oil, tiger balm, and sickness. Not the pleasant smell of someone's grandmother's kitchen, the smell of desperation, of medical bills and mounting debt and pride too stubborn to ask for help in any way that didn't involve demands and threats. The living room was small, crowded with furniture that had been nice once, maybe 20 years ago. A worn couch, a coffee table with water rings, family photos covering every surface, Dexter as a child, Dexter graduating college, Dexter's wedding to Elowen. In every photo, Malin stood stiff and unsmiling, as if happiness was a luxury she couldn't afford. And in the corner, in a wheelchair, sat Wayman Chen, Malin's husband, Dexter's father, 65 years old but looking 80, pale, skeletal, an IV pole next to him with medication dripping into his arm. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at a television playing some Mandarin drama at low volume. Diabetes, I knew, kidney failure, dialysis 3 times a week, medical bills that insurance only partially covered. The kind of slow-motion financial catastrophe that destroyed families, that turned decent people desperate, that made cruelty seem almost justified. Almost, but not quite. Dexter was there too, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, and I saw something in his face that made me even angrier than I already was. Not guilt, not remorse, fear. He was afraid, of me, of what I represented, of consequences finally arriving. Cordelia, he started, standing up. I can explain. Sit down, Dexter. He sat. I kept the rifle case on my shoulder, kept it visible. Let them all wonder what was inside. Let them make assumptions. Let them feel a fraction of the fear my daughter had felt when boiling water hit her skin. Malin crossed her arms, standing in front of the TV as if protecting Vyman from me. Your daughter disrespect our family, she announced. She have no gratitude. We ask for help. She say no. She's selfish like you. This is your fault. You raise her wrong. My fault, I repeated slowly, tasting each word. Let me make sure I understand. You asked my daughter for money. She said no. And your response was to assault her with boiling water, and somehow, in your mind, this is my fault. In our culture, Malin's voice rose, shrill with self-righteousness. Children take care of parents, son take care of parents, but your daughter, she poisoned my son. She make him forget duty. She make him selfish American. $15,000, I said. That's what you asked for, wasn't it? For Vyman's treatment. Her eyes narrowed. How you know this? Because Elowen tells me everything. She told me you needed money. She told me she and Dexter don't have $15,000 in savings. She told me they offered you $3,000 and you threw it back in her face. Literally, you spat on her. $3,000 is insult, Malin shouted. We need 15. Wyman need treatment. He'd die without treatment. And I offered, I continued, my voice getting quieter as hers got louder, to pay for Wyman's treatment directly, to wire the money to the hospital, to ensure he got the care he needed. Do you remember what you told me? Silence. You said you didn't want charity from a white woman who thinks she's better than everyone. You said you'd rather die than accept help from me. You said real families take care of their own, and if Dexter wasn't helping, it was because my daughter was controlling him. That's true, Malin insisted. Elowen control him. She make him weak. I turned to Dexter. Is that true? Does your wife control you? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. We make decisions together. That's what marriage is. So when your mother threw boiling water on your wife, that was a joint decision you made together? His face went pale. No, I didn't. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. You didn't know what to do, I repeated. Your wife was burned, screaming, and you didn't know whether to help her or defend your mother. Is that accurate? Cordelia, please, answer the question, Dexter. A long pause. Then, barely audible, "Yes." I adjusted the rifle case on my shoulder, letting the leather creak. Malin's eyes tracked the movement. "Good. Let her wonder. Let her sweat." "Here's what's going to happen," I said. I met Dexter Chen for the first time on a cold February evening 2 years ago. Elawan brought him to Sunday dinner at my penthouse, nervous in the way she'd been nervous before her first piano recital at age 7, wringing her hands, checking her reflection in every mirrored surface. She wanted me to like him, needed me to like him. He seemed nice enough, polite, well-educated, software engineer at some startup in Brooklyn, decent salary, good prospects. He held doors, said please and thank you, laughed at my jokes about the financial sector. When Elawan excused herself to the restroom, he turned to me with earnest brown eyes and said, "I want you to know I care about your daughter very much. I'll always take care of her." I'd smiled and said something appropriate. But even then, something in my chest had tightened. Not intuition exactly, more like experience. I'd spent 2 decades reading people across negotiation tables, spotting weakness disguised as strength, identifying the moment someone would fold under pressure. And Dexter had that quality, a softness, a tendency to defer. The kind of man who'd say whatever you think is best and mean it, because making decisions required a spine he didn't possess. Still, Elawan glowed when she looked at him. And I'd learned long ago that you can't protect your children from their own choices. You can only be there when those choices inevitably hurt them. The engagement came 6 months later. A modest proposal in Prospect Park. Nothing fancy. Elawan showed me the ring over FaceTime, practically vibrating with joy. 1 carat, decent quality, probably cost Dexter 2 months' salary. I'd said all the right things. "Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. He's a lucky man." What I didn't say, "I wish your father were here." Richard would have known what to say. Richard would have sat Dexter down, man to man, and extracted promises that actually meant something. But Richard had been dead for 6 years by then, and I'd learned to be both mother and father, soft and hard, comforting and cautionary all at once. The first family dinner with the Chens happened a month after the engagement. Elawan had been anxious about it for weeks. She wanted everyone to get along, wanted her worlds to merge smoothly. She'd chosen a neutral restaurant in Chinatown, thinking it might make Dexter's parents more comfortable. I'd suggested my penthouse instead, offered to cater Chinese food from the best restaurant in Manhattan. But Malin had apparently told Dexter she wouldn't feel comfortable in such an ostentatious place. I should have recognized that as the first warning sign. The restaurant was loud, crowded, fluorescent lit, the kind of place where the food was authentic and cheap and the ambiance was an afterthought. Maylene and Wyman arrived 15 minutes late. She wore a navy pantsuit that had been fashionable in 1995. He wore slacks and a button-down shirt that hung loose on his frame. Even then, he looked tired. Sick, though I didn't know it yet. We'd made stilted small talk. Malin asked about my work in a tone that suggested she'd already decided my answer would be offensive. I'd explained that I ran a financial consulting firm, helped companies optimize their portfolios, managed investments for high-net-worth clients. She'd nodded curtly and said something in Mandarin to Vyman. Dexter had flinched. "What did she say?" I'd asked pleasantly. Dexter had hesitated. She said it's interesting that you work with rich people's money." "And what else?" Another pause. "She wonders if you help ordinary people too, people who actually need help." I'd smiled. "Tell your mother that I started as an ordinary person. I came to this country with $300 and a business degree from a university in Buenos Aires that no one here had heard of. Everything I have, I built myself. And yes, I do pro bono work for nonprofits. But I don't feel the need to apologize for my success." Elawan had kicked me under the table, a gentle warning. Don't escalate. Keep the peace. But Malin had understood enough English to catch my tone. Her lips had pressed into a thin line. She'd spent the rest of dinner speaking exclusively in Mandarin, forcing Dexter to translate, making sure I knew I was the outsider, the interloper, the woman who didn't belong. When the check came, I'd reached for it automatically. Malin's hand had shot out, grabbing my wrist. "We pay," she'd announced in English. "Parents pay for family dinner." "That's not necessary." "We pay." Her grip had been surprisingly strong for such a small woman. "This is our culture. Parents pay." I'd withdrawn my hand, let her have her victory, watched as she'd counted out cash laboriously, bills worn soft from use. The meal had cost maybe $80. For her, I'd realized, that was significant. A statement. Proof that she could still provide, could still fulfill the role of matriarch, even as her husband sat beside her looking grayer by the minute. The warning signs had continued after that. Malin calling Elowen at odd hours, demanding to know where Dexter was, why he wasn't visiting, why he'd missed Sunday dinner. Guilt trips delivered in Mandarin that Elowen couldn't understand but could feel in the sharp edges of Malin's tone. Comments about how American women didn't understand family loyalty. Pointed questions about when Elowen would give her grandchildren, as if my daughter's primary purpose was to produce heirs. Then, 8 months ago, Vyman had the stroke. Not severe enough to kill him, but bad enough to change everything. Left side weakness, slurred speech. He'd been in the hospital for 2 weeks, then rehab for another month. When he finally came home, he needed round-the-clock care. Malin had quit her part-time job at the community center to care for him. Their savings evaporated. Medicare covered some costs, but not all. Not the medications, not the special equipment, not the home health aid they desperately needed, but couldn't afford. Dexter had started sending them money. 1,000 here, 1,500 there. He hadn't told Elowen at first. She'd only discovered it when she'd noticed their joint savings account dropping mysteriously. They'd fought about it. Their first real fight. Elowen had called me crying, saying she felt like a horrible person for being angry that her husband was helping his parents. I told her the truth. You're not horrible for wanting financial transparency in your marriage. And you're not horrible for questioning whether Dexter's help is actually helping, or just enabling his mother's refusal to accept help from anyone else. Because by then, I'd already offered multiple times to help with Wyman's care. I'd researched treatment facilities, found specialists, offered to cover costs that insurance wouldn't. Each time, Malin had refused. Too proud, too angry. Too convinced that accepting help from me was somehow a betrayal of her culture, her values, her identity as a self-sufficient matriarch. 3 months ago, the situation had reached a crisis point. Wyman needed kidney dialysis, the kind that required 3 sessions per week at a specialized clinic. The kind that cost $15,000 up front, even with insurance, before the clinic would schedule the first appointment. Malin had called Dexter in the middle of the night. Elowen had heard her shouting through the phone from across their bedroom, demanding, pleading, crying, saying Vyman would die without treatment, saying it was Dexter's duty as a son, saying if he loved his father, he'd find the money. Dexter and Elowen didn't have $15,000 in liquid savings. They'd just put a down payment on a small apartment in Brooklyn. They had student loans, the normal debt of young professionals trying to build a life in one of the most expensive cities in the world. Elowen had offered $3,000, everything they could spare without gutting their emergency fund. She'd driven to Queens personally to deliver the check, hoping to talk to Malin face to face, mother to daughter-in-law, woman to woman. Malin had torn the check in half, had called Elowen selfish, spoiled, a bad wife who was turning her son against his family. Then she'd spat on the ground at Elowen's feet and slammed the door. Elowen had called me from her car, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. I'd driven straight to Brooklyn, held her in my living room while she cried herself sick. She'd kept saying, "What if Wyman dies because of me? What if I'm the reason Dexter loses his father?" I'd called my attorney the next morning, had him draft a letter offering to cover all of Vyman's medical expenses, paid directly to the hospital and clinic with the condition that Malin stop harassing my daughter. Professional, legal, airtight. Malin's response had come through Dexter. She'd rather watch her husband die than accept blood money from a colonizer who thinks she can buy her way into our family. That's when I'd known this wouldn't end peacefully. That's when I'd started documenting everything, saving text messages, recording phone calls where legally permitted, building a file of evidence for a restraining order I hoped I'd never need. And now, standing in Mayleen's cramped living room with my husband's rifle case on my shoulder, watching her face twist with self-righteous fury, I realized I'd been naive. I should have filed that restraining order months ago, should have forced the issue, should have protected my daughter the way only a mother can, ruthlessly, preemptively, without apology. But I'd wanted to give Elowen space to handle her own marriage, wanted to respect her autonomy, wanted to believe that love and communication and cultural sensitivity could bridge any gap. I'd been wrong, and my daughter had burns on her arm to prove it. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, keeping my voice level and cold. "You're going to sit down and listen, and when I'm finished, you're going to make a choice. But first, I want to hear exactly what happened today. From the beginning." Malin's jaw clenched. "I don't have to tell you anything. This is my house. You leave now." "I'm not leaving until I understand why you thought it was acceptable to pour boiling water on my daughter." I adjusted the rifle case again, a deliberate movement. "So you can either explain yourself, or I can call the police right now and let them ask the questions. Your choice." Dexter stood up from the couch. "Cordelia, please, let me explain. Mom didn't mean—" "Sit down." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. The ice in my tone was enough. He sat. I turned back to Maylene. "I'm waiting." She glared at me for a long moment. Then, surprising me, she started talking. Not in the defensive, aggressive tone I'd expected. Something else. Something almost like justification, as if she genuinely believed she'd been right. "Elowen, come here today," she began, her English breaking under stress. "She bring my dishes back, the ones I loaned her 3 months ago. She come inside, I offer tea. She say no thank you, she have other plans. Always other plans, never time for family." "That's not true," Dexter interjected weakly. "We visit every other week." "Not enough," Malin whirled on her son. "Your father dying, you should visit every day." "But no, you too busy with your American wife, your American life. You forget where you come from." I let her vent, let her reveal herself. Every word was ammunition I could use later. "So I ask her," Maylene continued, turning back to me. "I ask about the money, the 15,000 we need. I tell her Vyman cannot wait anymore, kidneys failing. Doctors say he need dialysis now, not next month, not next week, now." "And what did Elowen say?" I asked. "She say she don't have money. She say they already give us 3,000. She say maybe we should—" Malin's face contorted with rage. "She say maybe we should apply for Medicaid, like we are poor people, like we are beggars. Medicaid helps thousands of families. We don't need government handout," Malin shouted. "We need our son to do his duty. This is what children for. You work hard, you sacrifice everything, you raise good son, and when you old, when you sick, son takes care of you. This is natural, this is right." "And when your son doesn't have the money you're demanding," I said quietly, "you punish his wife. Is that also natural? Is that also right?" "She lying about the money," Maylene's voice cracked. "She lying. I see her clothes, her fancy purse. I know she have money. She just selfish. You teach her to be selfish." "Elowen's purse cost $90 from Target," I said. "I know because I was with her when she bought it. And her clothes come from Zara and H&M. She's a freelance designer who makes about $40,000 a year. Combined with Dexter's salary, they're comfortable, but they're not wealthy, not even close." "She have you," Mylin pointed an accusing finger at me. You have millions. Why you don't help your daughter help us? I offered, multiple times. You refused. Because you try to control us. You think you better than us. You want us to. She struggled for the English word. To owe you, to be grateful, to bow down. I wanted your husband to receive medical care, I said. That's all. No strings attached, no control, just help, human decency. Liar, Mylin spat. Everyone wants something, nothing is free. I took a slow breath. This woman was drowning, and she was so busy fighting the life preserver that she couldn't see she was pulling everyone down with her. But my sympathy had limits, and she'd crossed them the moment she'd hurt my daughter. You still haven't explained the water, I said. Mylin's expression shifted. Something like guilt flickered across her face before anger covered it again. She make me so mad. She stand there in my house, wearing nice clothes, saying she don't have money, saying we should take government help like we are nothing, like all our hard work, all our sacrifice, it mean nothing. She disrespect us. She disrespect everything we build. So you went to the kitchen, I prompted. I go to make tea, to calm down. Her voice got quieter. But I so angry I shake. Wayman dying. My son forget his duty. This girl, this American girl, she take my son away from us. Everything falling apart. Everything we work for, gone. And then? A long pause. I pick up the pot, the water boiling for tea. I just want to scare her. Just want her to understand. This is serious. This is life and death. You wanted to scare her, I repeated flatly, by throwing boiling water at her. I don't mean to hit her. Mylin's voice rose defensively. She's supposed to move, but she just stand there, frozen, like stupid. And then? She stopped abruptly. And then the water hit her arm, I finished, and she screamed, and she fell to the floor, and your son, her husband, just stood there. Didn't call an ambulance, didn't help her, just stood there while his mother committed assault with a deadly weapon. It was accident, Mylin insisted. You just said you wanted to scare her. That's not an accident. That's intentional assault. The fact that you aimed poorly doesn't make it an accident. Dexter made a strangled sound. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something pathetic in his face. Not remorse, not horror at what his mother had done, just fear of consequences, fear of having to choose sides, fear of being forced to be an adult instead of a perpetual child caught between two women. Why didn't you stop her? I asked him directly. Your mother picked up a pot of boiling water. You must have seen what she was about to do. Why didn't you stop her? I didn't think she'd actually. You didn't think. Or you didn't want to think. Because thinking would have required action, and action would have required choosing your wife over your mother. And you've never been able to do that, have you? His silence was answer enough. I turned back to Mylin. After it happened, after Elowen was burned, what did you do? I tell her she should go to hospital. I tell Dexter to take her. Did you apologize? Mylin's face hardened. Why I should apologize? She bring this on herself. She disrespect us. In my culture, children who disrespect elders, they punished. This is normal. In your culture, I said slowly, each word deliberate. Is it normal to torture someone for saying no? Because that's what you did, Mylin. You tortured my daughter. You caused her permanent physical harm because she wouldn't give you money that she doesn't have. She have you, Mylin shouted again. You have money. You could help, but you choose not to. You want Wayman to die. You want us to suffer. I offered help. You refused it. What you wanted wasn't help. You wanted control. You wanted to prove that Dexter still belonged to you, not to his wife. You wanted to punish Elowen for the crime of marrying your son and expecting him to prioritize their marriage over your demands. Marriage is about family. Mylin's voice cracked. Not just two people, whole family. Dexter have duty to us. We give him everything. We work in factory so he could go to good school. We save every penny so he could go to college. We sacrifice our whole life. And now, when we need him, he say no because of her. For a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of understanding. This woman had given everything for her son, had immigrated to a country that didn't want her, had worked jobs that destroyed her body, had lived in poverty so her child could have opportunities she'd never had. And now that child was thriving while she was drowning, and the unfairness of it must have felt like a physical wound. But understanding isn't the same as forgiveness. And my daughter's burned arm meant we were past the point where understanding mattered. "You're right," I said, and watched surprise flash across Malin's face. "You did sacrifice everything. You worked hard. You gave Dexter opportunities. And he's grateful. He sends you money every month, even when he can't afford it. He visits. He calls. He's tried to help. Not enough." "It will never be enough," I interrupted, "because what you want isn't help. What you want is ownership. You want Dexter to be the son who sacrifices his marriage, his happiness, his future, because you sacrificed yours. You want him to suffer because you suffered. That's not culture, Maylene. That's trauma. And you're trying to pass it down like an inheritance. You don't understand our culture." "I understand that every culture has abusers who hide behind tradition," I said. "I understand that calling something cultural doesn't make it right. And I understand that you just committed a felony, and no amount of cultural justification is going to change that fact." The room went silent, except for the low murmur of the Chinese drama on TV. Wayman hadn't moved through any of this, hadn't reacted. I wondered if he even understood what was happening. If somewhere in his stroke-damaged mind, he knew his wife had just destroyed what was left of their family. "Here's what happens next," I said, shifting the rifle case slightly. Milan's eyes tracked the movement. "Good. Let her stay scared. I have two options prepared. You're going to choose one. There is no third option. There is no negotiation. You choose or I choose for you, and you won't like my choice." I pulled a thick envelope from my purse, set it on the coffee table between us. Option 1, you sign a confession. Complete, detailed, notarized. You admit you deliberately threw boiling water at Elowen. You admit it was intentional, not accidental. You agree to pay all of her medical expenses, current and future. Every doctor visit, every scar treatment, every therapy session she needs because of what you did. You also agree to a restraining order. No contact with Elowen. None. Ever. Not through Dexter, not through friends, not through social media. You stay away from my daughter for the rest of your life. "And if I sign this?" Maylene asked, her voice tight. "Then I don't file criminal charges. You avoid jail time. You avoid a trial. You avoid a permanent criminal record that would make it impossible for you to work, to travel, to do anything except sit in this house and watch your husband die." "You said criminal charges," Dexter spoke up. "But you'd still file civil charges?" "Yes. The confession gives us leverage for a civil suit. But civil consequences are financial, not criminal. She'd face fines, restitution, but not imprisonment. And frankly, if she signs this and stays away from Elowen, I might be willing to settle the civil case quickly and quietly." "What is option 2? Maylene asked. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of it build. Then, option 2, I do nothing at all with this envelope. Instead, I call my attorney. He calls the district attorney. We file formal criminal charges. Assault with a deadly weapon. Yes, boiling water legally qualifies. Assault causing great bodily harm. Potentially attempted murder, depending on how aggressive the DA wants to be. You get arrested, processed, fingerprinted, mugshot, the whole experience. Malin's face had gone pale. "I'm 62 years old. You're 62 years old, and you committed a violent felony. Age isn't a defense. You go to trial, and I promise you, Malin, I will spare no expense making sure you're convicted. I will hire the best prosecutors money can buy to work with the DA. I will find every expert witness who can testify to the severity of Alohan's injuries. I will make sure the jury sees the photos, hears her testimony, understands exactly what you did and why you did it. No jury would convict me, she said, but her voice wavered. They understand. Mother-in-law, daughter-in-law problems. This is normal family conflict. You think a jury in New York is going to sympathize with you? I asked. You think they're going to hear that you threw boiling water on a 29-year-old woman because she wouldn't give you money and think, oh, that's just normal family conflict? You're delusional. My lawyer will say, your lawyer? I laughed, sharp and bitter. What lawyer, Malin? You can't afford Vyman's dialysis. How are you going to afford a criminal defense attorney? You'll get a public defender who's handling 200 cases and hasn't slept in a week. Meanwhile, I'll have a team of attorneys making sure every detail is perfect, every charge is airtight, every piece of evidence is documented and preserved. She stood there, trembling with rage or fear or both. Dexter looked like he might vomit, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just cold determination. When you're convicted, I continued, and you will be convicted, you'll go to prison. Probably 5 to 10 years, depending on the judge. And while you're in prison, who takes care of Wayman? Who manages his dialysis appointments? Who makes sure he takes his medications? Dexter? He'll be too busy dealing with the shame of having a mother in prison and a wife who's divorcing him because he didn't protect her. Divorce? Dexter's head snapped up. Alohan wouldn't she? I looked at him. Your mother assaulted your wife. You did nothing. You think Alohan is going to stay married to you after this? You think she's going to forgive you for standing there like a coward while she was burned? His face crumbled. Good. He needed to understand what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away by refusing to choose. So those are your options, Malin, I said. Sign the confession, accept the restraining order, pay the medical bills, and avoid prison. Or refuse, face criminal charges, and spend the next decade in a cell while your husband deteriorates without you. Choose. Malin stared at the envelope on the coffee table like it was a venomous snake. Her hands were shaking. Not with fear, I realized. With rage so pure it was almost incandescent. You think you so smart, she said quietly, dangerously. You come into my house with your expensive clothes and your threats. You think because you have money, you have power. You think you can control everything. I don't need to control everything, I replied. Just this situation. Just the consequences of what you did to my daughter. Your daughter? Mayleen's laugh was ugly. You talk about your daughter like she is precious flower. But you know what I see? I see spoiled American girl who never work hard day in her life, who never sacrifice anything, who take, and give nothing back. She offered you $3,000. $3,000! Mayleen's voice rose to a shriek. You know what I do for $3,000? I work in factory for 6 months. 6 months, 10 hours a day, sewing buttons on coats in room with no windows, no air conditioning. My hands bleed. My back hurts so bad I cannot stand straight. But I do it because I have no choice. And your daughter, she spent $3,000 on what? Fancy coffee? Nice dinner? She don't know what sacrifice means. You're right, I said, and watched her stumble over her own momentum. Alohan doesn't know what it's like to work in a factory. She doesn't know what it's like to be an immigrant struggling in a country that doesn't want her. She doesn't know your pain, but that doesn't give you the right to burn her. I don't need your permission for anything. Malin grabbed the envelope, tore it open with shaking hands. She pulled out the papers inside, scanned them quickly. Her English was better than she pretended. I'd always suspected that. This is garbage, she announced, throwing the papers back on the table. You think I sign this? You think I admit I am criminal? I am not criminal. I am mother protecting my family. You assaulted someone with boiling water. That's not protection. That's violence. In my country. You're not in your country, I snapped. "You're in America. You've been here for 30 years. You raised your son here. You benefited from everything this country gave you. Education for Dexter, opportunities, freedom. But now, when it's convenient, you want to hide behind culture? You want to pretend that American laws don't apply to you because you're Chinese? That's not how this works." Malin's face twisted. "You hate Chinese people. You always hate us. I see it in your eyes from first time we meet. You think we are beneath you." "I don't hate Chinese people. I hate people who hurt my daughter. The fact that you're Chinese is irrelevant." "Then why you don't help us?" Her voice cracked. "If you not hate us, why you let Vyman die?" And there it was, the real question underneath all the rage and justification. Why wouldn't I save her husband? Why wouldn't I use my money, my resources, my power to fix the one thing she couldn't fix herself? I could have said a lot of things. I could have reminded her that I'd offered help, and she'd refused. I could have pointed out that her pride was killing her husband more surely than his kidney failure. I could have been cruel. Instead, I told her the truth. "I tried to help," I said quietly. "Multiple times. I offered to pay for Vyman's treatment. I offered to find him the best specialists in New York. I offered to cover everything, no strings attached. And every time, you said no. You said you didn't want my help. You said you'd rather die than accept charity from me. So I stopped offering. What else was I supposed to do? Force you to accept help you didn't want?" "You should try harder," Malin whispered. "You should understand. You should—" She stopped, wiped her eyes roughly. "You should care." "I do care. But I can't help someone who won't let me. And I won't let my daughter be collateral damage in your war against accepting help." Dexter stood up abruptly. "This is insane. All of this. Mom, just sign the papers. Please. Cordelia's right. You'll go to prison if you don't." "You want me to admit I'm criminal?" Malin turned on her son. "You want me to say I'm bad person? I'm your mother. I give you everything." "I know, Mom. I know." Dexter's voice broke. "But you hurt Elowen. You really hurt her. And I should have stopped you. I should have done something, but I didn't. And now everything is falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it." "You fix it by standing with family." Malin grabbed his arm. "Not with her. With us. We are your blood. She is just wife. Wives can be replaced. Family is forever." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the TV seemed to have gone quiet, though I knew it was still playing. Dexter pulled his arm free slowly, carefully, like he was defusing a bomb. "Elowen is my family too, Mom. She's my wife. She's supposed to be the most important person in my life." "Supposed to be?" Milan's voice dripped venom. "But not really. Because when she hurt, when she on floor crying, you don't help her. You just stand there, like coward." It was the first true thing she'd said all day. Dexter's face went white. I was in shock. I didn't know what to— "You knew," I interrupted. "You knew exactly what to do. You chose not to do it. And that choice has consequences. For your marriage, for your relationship with your mother, for everything." I picked up the papers from where Malin had thrown them, straightened them carefully, put them back in the envelope. "You have 48 hours to decide. Sign the confession and accept the restraining order, or face criminal charges. After 48 hours, the offer expires, and I proceed with option 2 automatically." "You cannot force me to sign," Malin said, but there was less certainty in her voice now. "I'm not forcing you. I'm giving you a choice you didn't give Elowen when you threw that water." I turned to leave, the rifle case still on my shoulder. Then I stopped, turned back. There was one more thing I needed to say, one more truth that needed to be spoken. "You asked why I wouldn't save Vyman," I said to Malin. "Here's the real answer. I would have. I still would. Even after everything you've done, I would pay for his treatment. Not because I like you, not because I think you deserve it, but because Elowen would want me to. Because despite everything, she still believes in compassion. She still believes in helping people, even people who hurt her. Maylin's eyes widened slightly. But there's a condition, I continued. You sign those papers. You stay away from my daughter. You accept the help without the abuse, without the guilt trips, without the demands and the manipulation. You let Dexter be a son without being a hostage, and in return, Vyman gets the treatment he needs, paid in full, best doctors, best care, everything. I let that sink in, watched her process it, watched the war playing out behind her eyes, pride versus pragmatism, rage versus survival. 48 hours, I repeated. Choose wisely. I walked out of that house without looking back, got into my Mercedes, set the rifle case carefully in the passenger seat, started the engine. My hands were shaking. Only then, alone in my car with the doors locked and the windows up, did I let myself feel it. The fear, the rage, the bone-deep terror that had been driving me since I'd seen that photo of Elowen's burns. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, and I let myself shake. Then I took out my phone and called my daughter. "Mom?" Her voice was thick with pain medication. What happened?" I gave her a choice, I said. Now we wait and see which version of herself she decides to be. 47 hours and 32 minutes later, my phone rang. I was in my home office, pretending to review quarterly reports, but actually staring at the same spreadsheet for the past 20 minutes. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. Queen's area code. "Cordelia Aldrich," I answered. "Ms. Aldrich." A woman's voice, professional, cool. "This is Dr. Patricia Chen from Queen's General Hospital. I'm calling about Vyman Chen. I understand you've been in contact with the family regarding his treatment?" My stomach dropped. He's stable for now, but his condition has deteriorated significantly in the past 48 hours. His kidneys are failing faster than we anticipated. He needs to start dialysis immediately, or he'll need to be placed on palliative care. The family has been difficult to reach. I closed my eyes. Of course, Maylin was letting her husband die rather than sign my papers, rather than accept help on terms that required her to admit what she'd done. Pride was going to kill him. "I'll handle it," I told Dr. Chen. "Give me 2 hours." I hung up and immediately called my attorney, Marcus Webb. He answered on the second ring. "Cordelia, I was just about to call you. The 48 hours are almost up. Have you heard from Mrs. Zhao?" "No. And now her husband is dying. I need you to prepare emergency medical power of attorney documents. If Wyman becomes incapacitated and Mylene refuses treatment, I want the legal right to authorize it anyway. That's complicated. You're not family. Then uncomplicate it. Bill me whatever you need to. But I'm not letting that man die because his wife is too stubborn to sign a confession." Marcus paused. "You know this isn't your responsibility, right? You've done everything you could, more than most people would. It became my responsibility when she hurt my daughter. Now it's a chess game and I'm not losing." I hung up and called Elowen. She answered immediately. "Mom, did she sign?" "Not yet. How are you feeling?" "The burns are better. The doctor says they're healing well. Might not even scar too badly if I'm careful." She paused. "Dexter came by yesterday." My hand tightened on the phone. "And?" "I didn't let him in. He stood outside the door for an hour, apologizing through it, saying he'd made a mistake, saying he'd choose differently if he could do it over." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I told him that if I could do it over isn't the same as actual courage, and then I told him to leave." Pride swelled in my chest. "Good. Mom, I know you think I'm weak sometimes, that I let people walk over me, but I'm done. I'm done being understanding, done making excuses for people who hurt me. Done. She took a shaky breath. I filed for divorce this morning. I had to sit down. Sweetheart, don't try to talk me out of it. I know it's fast. I know people will say I didn't give him a chance. But Mom, he stood there. He watched his mother burn me, and he did nothing. What kind of future do I have with someone like that? What happens when we have kids and his mother wants something? Does he stand there while she hurts them too? You're right, I said quietly. You're absolutely right. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared I'm making a mistake. I'm scared I'll regret it. But I'm more scared of staying. Fear of the right things is wisdom, not weakness. I'm proud of you. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long moment. Then I did something I rarely allowed myself to do. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the photo album I kept hidden there. Richard's photo album. Our life together, frozen in images that became more painful with each passing year. Richard on our wedding day, looking at me like I hung the moon. Richard holding baby Elowen, his face soft with wonder. Richard at Elowen's 8th birthday party, covered in cake frosting and laughing. Richard 3 months before he died, thinner already, but smiling at some joke I'd made. I don't know what you'd do in this situation, I said to the empty room, to his memory. You were always better at forgiveness than me, better at seeing the good in people. But Rich, she hurt our baby girl, and I won't let that stand. The photo didn't answer. It never did, but somehow, looking at Richard's face, I felt steadier, more certain. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Dexter. My father is in the hospital. Critical condition. My mother still won't sign your papers. Please, I don't know what else to do. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I stood up, grabbed my coat and purse, and headed for the door. Queen's General Hospital was exactly as depressing as I remembered from previous visits. Fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead. That particular smell of disinfectant failing to mask illness. Exhausted staff moving through corridors with the defeated shuffle of people who'd seen too much suffering. I found Dexter in the ICU waiting room. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 48 hours, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes that he'd probably slept in. Where's your mother? I asked without preamble. With Dad. They only let one person in at a time. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. He's dying, Cordelia. The doctors say maybe hours, maybe a day or two. His kidneys have completely shut down. The toxins in his blood, his voice broke. And Mom still won't sign. She says signing would be admitting she's a criminal, and she'd rather die than be called a criminal. So she's letting her husband die instead. That's insane. I know. Dexter stood up, started pacing. I've been telling her that. I've begged her, but she won't listen. She says if you really cared about Dad, you'd help him without conditions. She says requiring her to sign a confession proves you're just trying to control us, not help us. And what do you think? He stopped pacing, looked at me with something like desperation. I think my mother threw boiling water on my wife and I did nothing. I think I'm a coward. I think I deserve to lose everything. But my father? He doesn't deserve this. He's a good man. He never hurt anyone. And he's dying because my mother is too proud to admit she was wrong. Where's the envelope? The one I left with her? She burned it, Dexter said miserably. The second you left. Took it straight to the kitchen and set it on fire. Said she'd rather burn in hell than sign your confession. I absorbed this. Not surprised exactly. Disappointed maybe. I genuinely hoped she'd choose survival over pride. But some people would rather die right than live wrong. I have copies, I told Dexter. Multiple copies. The original was never the point. The point was giving her a choice. So what happens now? You press charges? Mom goes to jail while Dad dies? That depends on your mother. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, showed him a message from Marcus Webb. I had my attorney prepare emergency medical power of attorney documents. If your father becomes legally incapacitated, which, given his current condition, he probably already is, and if your mother refuses to authorize treatment, I can petition the court to override her decision and authorize dialysis myself. Dexter's mouth fell open. You can do that? I can try. It's legally complicated. There'll be a hearing. But given the circumstances, your mother's violent behavior, her refusal to accept help, the fact that her husband is dying unnecessarily, a judge might rule in my favor. You'd really do that? Even after everything? I'm not doing it for your mother. I'm not even doing it for your father, though he seems like a decent man who doesn't deserve to die like this. I'm doing it because Elowen would want me to. Because despite everything, my daughter still has compassion. She still believes in helping people. And I won't let your mother's pride destroy that part of her. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Chen, your mother is asking for you. Dexter looked at me. Will you come with me? Your mother doesn't want to see me. I don't care what she wants anymore. Please, I can't do this alone. We walked through the ICU together. The beeping of monitors, the hiss of ventilators, the quiet conversations of families saying goodbye. Wayman was in a corner room, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that were doing the work his organs couldn't do anymore. Malin sat in a chair beside his bed, holding his hand. She looked smaller than I remembered, shrunken, defeated. When she saw me, her face hardened, but she didn't have the energy for real anger anymore. You come to gloat? She asked quietly. I came to give you one more chance. I pulled a fresh envelope from my purse. Same deal. Sign the confession. Accept the restraining order. Let Waimin get treatment. Or don't, and watch him die because you couldn't admit you were wrong. You don't understand, Maylene said, not looking at me, looking at her husband. In my culture, losing face is worse than death. Admitting you are criminal, saying you are a bad person in front of everyone, this is destroying your whole life. Everything you build, your name, your honor, your place in community, all gone. And in my culture, I replied, we have a saying, pride comes before the fall. Your pride is killing your husband. Is that honorable? She flinched like I'd struck her. You want to talk about sacrifice? I continued. Fine. Let's talk about sacrifice. You sacrificed for your son, worked terrible jobs, lived in poverty, gave him opportunities. That's real sacrifice. That's love. But now, when your husband needs you to sacrifice your pride to save his life, you can't do it. So what does that say about your priorities? What matters more, your honor or his life? You make it sound simple, Maylene whispered, but is not simple. It is simple. Sign the papers, save your husband. Everything else is just noise. She turned to look at me finally. Really look at me. And I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not pride. Fear. Raw, undiluted fear. If I sign, what happened to me? She asked. I am old woman. No job, no money. Husband dying. Son hate me. If I admit I am criminal, who will help me? Who will take care of me? And there it was. The real terror underneath all the rage and justification. She wasn't afraid of losing face. She was afraid of being alone, of being abandoned, of ending up in a nursing home somewhere, forgotten, with no one visiting, no one caring whether she lived or died. I could have walked away, could have said it wasn't my problem, could have let her make her choice and live with the consequences. But I thought of Elowen, my daughter, who still believed in compassion even after being burned, who still wanted to help even after being hurt. If you sign, I said slowly, and if you stay away from Elowen like the restraining order requires, I'll make sure you're taken care of. Not because you deserve it, but because Vayman does. You'll have a home health aide for him, medical bills paid, enough money for groceries and utilities. Not a fortune, but enough. Malin stared at me. Why? Why you do this after I hurt your daughter? Because the alternative is letting you both die slowly of pride and poverty, and that helps no one. Dexter made a sound, half sob, half laugh. Mom, please, just sign. Let Cordelia help. Let Dad get treatment. We can figure everything else out later. Malin looked at her husband, looked at the machines keeping him alive, looked at the envelope in my hands. Then, slowly, she held out her hand. I gave her the envelope, gave her a pen, watched as she opened the papers with shaking hands and read through them carefully. She took a long time, read every word, every clause, every condition. Finally, she signed. Her handwriting was shaky, but legible. Meilin Zhao, today's date. I hate you, she said, handing the papers back to me. I will always hate you. I can live with that, I replied. I called Dr. Chen immediately, authorized the dialysis, signed the financial guarantee forms. Within an hour, Vyman was being prepped for his first treatment. Dexter walked me to the elevator. Thank you, he said quietly. I know you didn't have to do this. I know I don't deserve— You're right, you don't, but your father does, and Elowen does. She doesn't deserve to carry the guilt of knowing someone died because she refused to give in to abuse. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, turned to face him. Dexter, I want you to understand something. I did this for Elowen. Not for you. Not for your mother. The divorce papers she filed, don't contest them. Let her go. Let her heal. Let her build a life with someone who will actually protect her when it matters. I love her, he said, tears streaming down his face. I believe you, but love without courage isn't enough, and you proved you don't have the courage she needs. The elevator doors closed on his grief-stricken face. I drove home in silence. No music, no phone calls. Just silence and the weight of what I'd done settling over me like a heavy coat. When I got home, I called Elowen, told her everything, told her about the signed papers, about Wyman getting treatment, about my promise to help Malin. Mom, she said after a long pause, you're a better person than I am. No, I replied, I'm just a mother, and mothers do terrible, wonderful, complicated things to protect their children, even when those children are grown. I'm still divorcing him, she said firmly. Good, you should. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Elowen said, I love you, Mom. Thank you for always being my dragon when I needed one. After we hung up, I sat in my office with Richard's photo album open on my desk, looking at his face, wishing he were here, wishing he could tell me if I'd done the right thing. But the photos stayed silent, and I was left alone with my choices, my consequences, and the knowledge that sometimes there are no good options, only less terrible ones. And sometimes being a dragon means showing mercy, even when you'd rather breathe fire. 3 months later, I stood in a courtroom in downtown Manhattan watching a judge finalize Elowen's divorce. The proceedings took exactly 17 minutes. No drama, no contested assets. Dexter had signed everything without argument, as I told him to. The marriage was dissolved as cleanly as something that messy could be. Elowen sat beside me in a navy dress, her left arm still showing faint pink scars from the burns. They'd healed better than the doctors expected. Good genes, they'd said, and excellent care. The scar tissue was minimal. In another year, you'd barely notice unless you knew to look. But I would always know. I would always see those scars and remember the photo she'd sent me. Remember the rage that had driven me to Queens with a rifle case on my shoulder. Remember the look on Malin's face when she'd finally signed those papers. That's it? Elowen whispered, as the judge pronounced them officially divorced. It's really over? It's really over, I confirmed. We walked out of the courthouse into bright September sunshine. Elowen took a deep breath, tilted her face toward the sky. I thought I'd feel sadder, or more relieved, but I just feel empty. That's normal. You're grieving what you thought your life would be. Give it time. We went to lunch at her favorite Italian place in Soho, ordered too much food and expensive wine, talked about everything except Dexter and his family. Her design business was thriving. She'd landed 3 major clients in the past month. She'd moved into a new apartment in Park Slope, smaller than the place she'd shared with Dexter, but entirely hers. No memories, no ghosts. "I saw him last week," she said eventually, twirling pasta around her fork. "At the grocery store. He looked terrible, like he hasn't slept in weeks." "Good," I said, then caught myself. "Sorry, that's not charitable." "No, you're right. He should look terrible. He should feel terrible." She set down her fork. He tried to apologize again. Said he's been in therapy. Said he understands now what he did wrong. Said if I'd just give him another chance. "What did you say?" "I said, understanding isn't the same as changing, and I'm not interested in being his practice girlfriend while he learns how to be an actual partner." She smiled slightly. "You would have been proud. I didn't yell, didn't cry, just told him the truth and walked away." I raised my wine glass. "To walking away from people who don't deserve you." She clinked her glass against mine. "To dragon mothers who teach their daughters to breathe fire." After lunch, she went back to work and I went home to my penthouse. Laura had left a stack of messages on my desk. Clients needing consultations. Investment opportunities requiring review. The normal rhythm of my life, unchanged by the drama of the past 3 months. Except one message stood out. A handwritten note on Laura's distinctive purple sticky note. "Dexter Chen called. 3rd time this week. Says he needs to speak with you urgently. Didn't sound like business. Your call whether to respond." I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. The restraining order had been filed and approved. Mylan was required to stay at least 500 feet from Elowen at all times. No contact, direct or indirect. The civil settlement had been finalized 2 weeks ago. Maylene would pay $15,000 in restitution over the next 5 years, monthly installments automatically deducted from the account I'd set up for Vayman's care expenses. She'd never actually see that money. It would flow from the medical fund to the restitution fund in a closed loop. But legally, she was paying her debt. As for Vayman, he was alive. The dialysis had stabilized him. He'd never be healthy exactly, but he was comfortable, alert, able to have conversations, watch television, eat real food. The home health aide I'd hired, a gentle Filipina woman named Rosa, visited 3 times a week to help with his care and give Maylene breaks. I'd kept my promise. I'd taken care of them. Not out of kindness, out of strategic calculation, because if they were comfortable, they had no reason to contact Elowen. No emergency that would require her intervention. No crisis that would pull her back into their orbit. I'd bought her freedom with money. It was the only currency that mattered in situations like these. My phone rang. Marcus Webb. "Cordelia, I have news. The DA's office called. They're officially declining to file criminal charges against Maylin Zhao." I'd expected this. The signed confession and civil settlement had given them an out. Why waste resources on a prosecution when the victim's family had handled it privately? Good. That's what we wanted. There's more. Apparently Dexter Chen has been calling the DA's office repeatedly, trying to get them to investigate you for extortion and coercion. Claims you threatened his mother with a gun. Claims you forced her to sign the confession under duress. I sat down slowly. And they're ignoring him. The confession was notarized with my supervision. Maylene never claimed duress at the time of signing. There's no evidence of a gun, because obviously there was no gun. The DA told him to stop wasting their time or they'd consider filing charges against his mother after all. So Dexter is trying to protect his mother by destroying me. Looks like it. Pathetic, really. Too little. Too late. Marcus paused. "He can't hurt you, Cordelia. I made sure of that. The documentation is airtight, but I thought you should know he's trying." After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, watching the sun set over Manhattan. thinking about Dexter's phone calls, his desperation to fix things, his need to be the hero of a story where he'd been the villain. Part of me felt sorry for him. He'd lost everything: his wife, his self-respect, his illusions about his family. He was trying to rewrite the narrative, make himself the victim instead of the perpetrator. It was almost human. But mostly, I felt nothing. He'd made his choices. Now he was living with them. That was how the world worked. My phone buzzed. A text from Elowen. "Dinner next Sunday? I'm bringing someone I want you to meet." I stared at the message. Someone she wanted me to meet. Already? Then I smiled. My daughter was moving forward, building a new life, choosing happiness over bitterness. That was all I'd ever wanted for her. I texted back, "Can't wait, I'll cook." That night, alone in my penthouse with a glass of wine and Richard's photo album, I let myself think about what I'd done, the threats, the manipulation. The way I'd used fear and money and legal leverage to force an outcome I wanted. I told myself it was justice, protection, a mother defending her child. But if I was honest, really honest, it was also revenge. I'd wanted Maylene to suffer, wanted her to feel helpless and afraid the way Elowen had felt, wanted her to understand that actions have consequences and you can't hurt people without cost. Was that wrong? Probably. Was it justified? Maybe. Would I do it again? Without hesitation. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't a good person or a bad person. I was a mother. And mothers are capable of anything when their children are threatened. We become dragons. We breathe fire. We destroy obstacles and protect our young with a ruthlessness that would terrify us if we examined it too closely. So I didn't examine it. I just accepted it. This was who I'd become when that text message arrived 3 months ago. This was who I'd always been, underneath the polished suits and boardroom diplomacy. A woman who would walk into a house carrying an empty rifle case if that's what it took to protect her daughter. A woman who would show mercy to her enemies if that's what it took to buy her daughter's peace. A woman who would do terrible, necessary things and then pour herself a glass of wine and live with the consequences. I closed Richard's photo album and put it back in the drawer. He would have handled this differently. More compassion, less calculation, more forgiveness, less fire. But Richard was gone, and I was here, and Elowen was safe. That was all that mattered. I picked up my phone and texted back to Elowen. "P.S. Please tell me this someone treats you better than the last one. Dragon Mother is watching." Her response came immediately. "Don't worry, she's amazing. You'll love her." She. I smiled. My daughter, building a life on her own terms, making choices that made her happy, moving forward instead of backward. 3 months ago, she'd been burned, betrayed, broken. Now she was healing, thriving, free. I'd given her that freedom. However I'd done it, whatever moral lines I'd crossed, I'd given her the space to rebuild her life without fear. And if that made me a dragon, good. The world needed more dragons, especially the ones who loved fiercely enough to burn down obstacles and gentle enough to show mercy when it mattered. I raised my wine glass to the Manhattan skyline, glittering with a million lights. "To complicated women making impossible choices," I said to the empty room, "and to daughters who teach their mothers that strength and compassion aren't opposites." Somewhere in Queens, Maylin Zhao was probably cursing my name. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Dexter Chen was probably staring at his phone, trying to figure out how to fix the unfixable. And here in Manhattan, I was drinking good wine and planning Sunday dinner with my daughter and the woman who made her happy. Life moved forward. Scars faded. Dragons rested. Until they were needed again.